We begin with that fatal shooting on a film set in Santa Fe County, New Mexico. Police say actor Alec Baldwin discharged a prop gun during a scene for a new Western movie called Rust, killing the film's director of photography, Helena Hutchins. She was 42 years old.
The director, Joel Souza, was also injured and taken to a nearby hospital. Rust actress Frances Fisher tweeted this morning that Souza has since been released, though NBC has not been able to confirm that yet. A spokesperson for Baldwin described it as an accident. No charges have been filed, but police continue to investigate the circumstances.
We'll stay on that this morning, but now to our other big story. The weeks-long search for Brian Laundrie has come to a tragic end.
The FBI confirming yesterday the human remains found out in a nature reserve are those of Brian Laundrie. Investigators were able to use dental records to connect the remains to Laundrie.
The identification came just hours after the remains were found in the nature reserve Laundrie was thought to be hiding out in, and only 2 days since Laundrie's parents offered to assist police by joining in on the search for their son. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Stanton is live outside of the Laundrie's home in Northport, Florida, and retired FBI Special Agent George Carr joins us with his take on this investigation. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for joining us. Some big news just breaking overnight. So, Stephanie, let's talk through the timeline here. So, Brian Laundrie's parents' involvement in this search is, puzzling to say the least, I suppose. What are you hearing from investigators about how much Brian's parents really knew about their son's whereabouts? What are they looking for next here to learn from them?
Yeah, well, good morning to you. As we know, and this is all according to the family attorney who spoke with NBC News yesterday, as we know, the family says, according to the attorney, that they decided on their own to set out to search for their son on Wednesday morning. And they are searching at that Myakkahatchee Park, which is only about 5 miles from here in Northport, the Laundrie home. So they call police. They set out on their own. They go to that park, and that is where they find those belongings. And then police, around the same time, locate the remains. They found that part of the human skull. That was then sent in for the identification via dental records, and that is when we found out that it was indeed Brian Laundrie. So, according to the attorney, he says that it was purely happenstance that the family decided on their own to go to the park at that point. Now, bear in mind, the park had just reopened. The family claims, and the attorney says, that they told authorities that that was one of the areas that they should search. And, of course, it is connected to the Carlton Reserve, which is where authorities have been searching all along. And as we heard from investigators, a lot of that was underwater, possibly chest high. And so now that the water was receded, that is what the attorney says happened, and that is how they were able to locate not only the remains but the belongings.
George, I want to bring you in here for your perspective on the investigation. Take a listen here to what Steve Bertolino, he's the Laundrie family attorney, what he said about the discovery of Brian's remains.
So people with firsthand knowledge of the conditions of that park have said that this was under 2 to 3 feet of water, and yet still John Q. Public can't get it in their head that these areas were inaccessible, and the items that were located today, or I should say yesterday, perhaps couldn't be seen. So we're not just saying it. I'm not just saying it. The FBI is saying it. Everyone is saying it.
Is it reasonable that investigators took more than 5 weeks to find him just about a mile from the park's entrance, that this area was covered in water and that it was inaccessible?
So searches around and in water are inherently difficult because you're working in a different medium. Things are concealed. It's very difficult to locate a starting point. So it is plausible that it would take that long to identify an area. And certainly once the water receded, it would make that much more easily obtained. So it is plausible that it would take, a number of weeks, especially if that area was consistently underwater. The FBI does have resources to search underwater. However, those resources can't be applied in every case. And if you look at the topography and the geography and the brush and the trees there, that's a very difficult search area, especially when it's submerged in water.
Now, Stephanie, walk us through what we know about where the investigation stands this morning, given that the only person of interest, the remains, have now been identified. What does that mean or the next steps for the FBI and local police? And also, what do we think is going to be the involvement of Brian Laundrie's parents?
Well, the investigation is continuing. We know that the remains were in some pretty difficult conditions, so finding an exact cause of death could be quite difficult. But there was the backpack found there. There was also that notebook that was wet. So what's going to happen now, as far as we understand, is that the FBI will probably be using some forensic technology to try to dry that notebook out to see if there's any information in there that they could glean as to not only what may have led to the death of Brian Laundrie, but also Gabby Petito. So this investigation is still ongoing.
And George, I want to have you take a listen to what Bertolino also had to say about a potential deal that Brian Laundrie's parents could have made with investigators to get some level of immunity in the case. Do they need immunity? Take a listen.
What I can tell you is that conversations were had several weeks ago with the FBI with respect to certain charges. When questioned and when communications were had between myself and the FBI, I think it was realized that charges were not appropriate. There was never a threat. There was never a coercion. There was never a deal cut. But
we're talking about misdemeanor charges?
Would not have been
Steve, misdemeanor or felony charges?
I don't know what level of crime or charge was in the mix.
In your experience, has the parents' participation in the investigation been sufficient enough for the FBI and local police? Why would they be facing any sorts of charges?
So it'd be very difficult at this point, with the facts that we have now, to consider charges against the parent. If they did something to aid and abet or obstruct the investigation, then possibly charges could be brought. But based on the facts that are present today, I think it would be very difficult to charge the parents. Now, as the case develops, and this is going to become more of a historical case in terms of the evidence and a very heavy forensics case, and once the FBI is able to process the items that were recovered, that may lead to more information and another fact pattern that might change the circumstances. But right now, it would seem to be very difficult to bring charges against the parents.
All right, George and Stephanie, thank you so much for walking us through this breaking news this morning.
We turn now to a major step forward in our fight against COVID. The CDC has authorized both Moderna and Johnson & Johnson to administer vaccine booster shots to millions of Americans.
That's right. The agency also cleared the way for doctors and pharmacies to mix and match vaccine doses. That adds flexibility for those looking to maximize their COVID immunity. CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky will now decide how the vaccine doses will be rolled out, including who will qualify for the shots. And that decision is expected to be made in the coming days. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar joins us on set for more on this. And I'm so happy that you're here, Doctor, because you always keep it real with us. And this is a little confusing. So let's talk through it. Let's just first start with the fact that we have this go-ahead to have these boosters and this flexibility with mix and match.
Yes.
Walk us through what that means in our fight against COVID, what it does for immunity.
Well, I think the decision yesterday by the CDC was not unexpected, right? This comes on the heels of the FDA authorizing boosters for Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, almost as if they were compelled to, because they, of course, approved the boosters for Pfizer about a month previously. I think most experts have said we are not going to boost our way out of this pandemic. The boosters, of course, are authorized because we do think that there is some waning immunity. But I still have to I always like to reinforce to folks that protection against severe disease, hospitalization, and death is certainly still very, very strong in this country. But there are vulnerable groups who should be boosted right now.
I know you've been watching these CDC and FDA hearings closely.
Yes.
This is like your homework.
Yeah.
Mixing and matching. Okay, we've got the go-ahead, all three major shots. What is the data telling you about what combination of mixing and matching gives you the best protection?
So that is the perfect question for me to say there is no data on protection with mixing and matching. What we have is very early, what we call serologic or immunological data. We have data at 15 days that tells us which combination gives you the highest number of neutralizing antibodies. What we don't have, Vicki, importantly, is does that actually confer protection 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, which is very, very important and very key here that CDC and FDA really made a point to say, we are not telling you which combination is best, which combination you should get, because they don't have any data to support that decision. What they are saying is that we want to allow mix and match because there are certain populations that may choose not to get another Johnson & Johnson. Women of childbearing age, for example, because of the clotting issue. Younger men with mRNA because of myocarditis. They want people to have a choice. But again, they are absolutely not specifying a preference for combination.
So, Doctor, are you concerned generally about hesitancy, the fact that we do have so many people who are still unvaccinated? People who got the shot might have been like, okay, I'll get it because I want to go back to normal. Now people being like, do I need more of this shot, to your point, that had these issues in rollout? And we talked a lot about some of it's PR issues, but some of it were real concerns for people.
Yeah.
And especially with mixing and matching. And I think the J&J one is a good example because I think some people got that shot because they didn't want mRNA. That's with the research they had done.
Right.
Then the blood clot thing happens.
Or actually, I think this is another key point with Johnson & Johnson. It was touted, right? It was advertised as a one-shot vaccine.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do have to say that I think that was also sort of more a global public health kind of push and initiative. They were always studying the 2 shots for Johnson & Johnson. It clearly needs to be a 2-shot vaccine. To your point about concern about public, trust, I should say, in the system. Now that we're saying you need a vaccine booster, definitely we don't want to send the message that if you got 2 shots and you're otherwise healthy, you need a 3rd. And it very clearly in the guidelines, young, healthy people do not need a booster. That's why they have specified those guidelines and categories for people who should get the mRNA booster. Everyone who got Johnson & Johnson needs a 2nd shot.
Okay, that's really good. Those are the 2 good takeaways.
Those are your takeaways.
Let me quickly ask you, Dr. Azar, about kids. 28 million kids, 5 to 11, are now eligible for their vaccines.
Yes.
As a parent, myself, with 2 kids in that age range, what's your thought on, how quickly people should be running out to get that? And if people are a little hesitant, if parents are a little hesitant, what would you say to them?
So I understand the hesitancy. What I've been trying to tell folks is this. We talk about these 28 million kids between the ages of 5 and 11, and we all assume that they're healthy. And we say, why are we inoculating our healthy kids to protect adults? 2 points. Not all children between 5 and 11 are healthy. In fact, there's a considerable number who are not. They are immunocompromised. They are cancer patients. And so we're inoculating our healthy children to protect the more vulnerable in our society. And a final note, we always have to inoculate everybody. Think about measles. Think about polio. We don't get to herd immunity, especially with a contagious bug like this, by just vaccinating adults alone. Kids have always been part of that equation, for better or for worse.
Dr. Azar, thank you so much, as always, giving us great things to think about and practical advice.
People are confused, and you're helping us all understand it. Always great to have you also on set with us. Thank you. Now, basketball fans are celebrating the return of the NBA after 2020 was spent inside that famous bubble. From Knicks fans going crazy outside Madison Square Garden during their home opener, to disappointment in Los Angeles over their loss to the Golden State Warriors. I sound like I know what I'm talking about, don't I? The NBA is going into its 75th year with tons of highly anticipated action, but some of those headlines are being overshadowed by vaccine controversies. Owners are battling with players and governors over a range of COVID mandates, and how the NBA will push through this season remains to be seen. NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky joins us now from the American Airlines Center in Dallas with the latest. Morgan, good morning. This is in some ways a fun one to talk about, but in other ways it's getting quite complicated. So walk us through what's happening there where you are in Texas right now. Where does Governor Abbott stand on COVID protocols in those sports arenas with lots of fans in there cheering? And how is Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban responding?
Yeah, Savannah, good morning. Certainly good to see the NBA come back. It is going to be different than last year, whenever there was a portion of time when we didn't even have any fans in the stands, and then we saw those bubbles created for the playoffs. As far as this season goes, it's going to feel somewhat familiar. Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban is letting fans back in the stands here to have that game day experience that so many of us missed watching basketball. Governor Greg Abbott, on his part, has said that he is against any vaccine mandate when it comes to an employer. As far as sports arenas go, they are in support of getting that back to normal as quickly as possible. But I want you to hear what Mark Cuban had to say as far as what he'll be doing on behalf of his employees, of the Mavericks organization, of everyone working inside this building whenever games are being held, when it comes down to getting that COVID-19 vaccine. Take a listen.
If you work for me, I require my employees to be vaccinated, unless there's a doctor's reason where they can't be. You know, like you, I don't want my kids to be at risk. So, you know, the consequences of you not being vaccinated is I'm not going to shut the up. I'm going to be in your ear driving you crazy.
Hello.
Yeah, Mark Cuban not mincing any words there on his stance. Yeah, absolutely. You know where he stands. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, it's interesting. Earlier in the summer, up until about August, he said that it was the employer's right to choose how to handle vaccination status within the ranks of its employees. And then it was in late August that he issued an executive order that banned those vaccine mandates from being created by employers. Whether or not that remains to be seen if there's going to be any pushback. We're still waiting to see that, but that's currently the policy here for the Mavericks organization. Savannah?
Yeah, if you hadn't had your coffee yet, maybe Mark Cuban just woke you up a little bit there, but you're right. We certainly know where he stands. All right, one of the big talking points here in this whole back and forth is, of course, Kyrie Irving. And I don't know much about sports, but I know that he's a Brooklyn Nets superstar. So he was not on the court for opening day against the Milwaukee Bucks last night, and it was noticeable. Do we have any idea how long he plans to sit out? Do we have any idea on his vaccination status? Will the Nets be able to get their star player back on the court anytime soon?
Right, all good questions. Kyrie Irving might be the only one who has the answers to those. We know that his decision to not get vaccinated has essentially cut his salary in half, going from more than $30 million down to an estimated $17 to $19 million because he's not getting paid for the home games that he would play in Madison Square Garden. And we're told that right now, the organization has reached out to Kyrie, and he's saying, please respect my privacy and my decision. And so there is no timetable on when or if he will get vaccinated. Meanwhile, he has certainly been criticized by some big names, Magic Johnson, Charles Barkley, former NBA superstars, saying that he's essentially being selfish when it comes to his teammates, and that you don't get vaccinated for you, you get vaccinated to help other people. And so that's currently the ongoing situation with Kyrie. Savannah?
All right, Morgan Chesky, lots to keep watching for there as the season unfolds. Thank you so much. Thanks for being up early for us.
A lot of beeps woke us all up. Yeah. This morning, the decision to charge former Donald Trump advisor Steve Bannon with criminal contempt now lies with the Department of Justice. On Thursday, the House of Representatives passed a resolution finding Bannon in contempt of Congress. He refused to comply with a January 6th committee subpoena. Representatives on both sides of the aisle clashed ahead of that vote. Take a listen.
The Select Committee despises Steve Bannon's politics, so they're abusing their power to put him in jail.
You cannot blow off a subpoena in America. You cannot sit on your couch and defy the people's representatives in Congress.
Fiery words. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins us now. She's been following this. Ali, now that this is in the hands of the DOJ, let's talk about the timeline here. What comes next, and is this going to be a long, drawn-out process?
Well, the timeline is important because, as you and I have been talking about all week, the committee is up against the clock, specifically that next November election in 2022. If Republicans were to retake the House, that would really blow up the January 6th committee's ability to investigate this in the way that they have been and the way that they want to going forward. What we're going to see now that the House has voted this over to the Department of Justice is DOJ will confirm receipt, and then that's pretty much it until we either see that charges have been filed and the DOJ has chosen to move forward to prosecute, or alternatively, they may not do that at all. And we could hear from Steve Bannon's lawyer who says, hey, my client hasn't seen any further action on this, and they're going to move forward in that way as well. I think the important thing from yesterday, though, is that this is, again, about upholding the Congress's ability to subpoena for information and have those subpoenas be obeyed.
We got to see how quickly the wheels of justice move. We knew the two Republicans on the January 6th committee, Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, they were going to vote with the Democrats. But then 7 other Republicans also voted to pass that resolution finding Bannon in contempt. What can you tell us about these 7?
Yeah, Kinzinger and Cheney, not surprising. They are the only 2 people on the Republican side on the committee. But at the same time, then, there were 9 of them total. 7 of those 9 people voted to impeach former President Donald Trump during his second impeachment, the one where they discussed the role that he played in fomenting the January 6th insurrection. We knew that there could have been 10 of those such Republicans. Those are the 10 who voted to impeach. We saw 7 of them then come over and join Democrats yesterday in this vote to refer the Steve Steve Bannon subpoena off the floor of the House and over to the Department of Justice. The other two folks there I thought were really interesting. Brian Fitzpatrick comes from a bellwether district in Pennsylvania. He voted with the Democrats to move this off the floor and over to DOJ. And then Congresswoman Nancy Mace, she was fascinating because she did this for the larger power here, the power of subpoena of Congress that you and I were just talking about. She says that she wants to see that be able to be upheld and have the power that it needs to have to mean something once Republicans retake the House. She wants to see that precedent kept, and that's why she referred the Bannon contempt referral over to DOJ.
So there are a few other people who have been instructed by the January 6th committee to appear for depositions. Do you know anything about them, and what's the word on the street of whether or not they're going to go the Bannon route, ignore it, or actually appear?
Well, look, we're always asking, but when I last caught up with Chairman Benny Thompson, he told me that Bannon was the only one who wasn't complying or in conversation with the committee in some way. They've had people come forward voluntarily. They have thousands of documents coming their way, from subpoena requests and other requests made from everything from telecom and tech companies, also to the individual level, because we've seen subpoenas flying out the door over the last few weeks. Many of those deadlines are still coming. The month of October was rife with deadlines for the January 6th committee for people to comply with subpoenas. But even of just those big four, Mark Meadows, Steve Bannon, Kash Patel, and Dan Scavino, they were all served at the same time. Scavino's timeline now is a little bit different because they had a little trouble finding him initially to serve him the subpoena. They did find him though, and now his timeline is on. But for Kash Patel and Mark Meadows, they've at least been talking with the committee on the legal level, on the lawyer level. So they are seeing from everyone else who they've subpoenaed so far. Chairman Thompson says Bannon is the only one who they are not actively talking with and who is not complying in some form or fashion with the subpoena request. That's going to be notable though, because again, the Bannon work that we've seen them do this week, it's meant to pressure not just Bannon to comply, but anyone else that the committee may subpoena going forward. They want to make sure that everyone is working with them.
Allie, TikTok, thanks so much.
Now, as President Biden pushes on with trying to get his massive infrastructure bill passed, some members of his own party continue to hold out against the legislation. One of those, you know who it is, West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin. He's reportedly pushed back on parts of the bill that tackle climate change as well as the child tax credit. So what do his constituents in one of the nation's poorest states have to say about his stance? NBC News correspondent Cal Perry went to Charleston, West Virginia to get the answer to that exact question, something we've all been wondering. He joins us now. Hi, Cal. Good morning. So the county that you're in, Senator Manchin won re-election in 2018 with more than 61% of the vote. How do people who live there feel right now?
Well, I think we need a little background on this, right? He entered the state Senate in 1981, so he is a known quantity here. That's to say the least. He's a generational politician here in West Virginia. And in a county like this one, where you said he won by such a large margin, I think there's a great deal of trust in what Senator Manchin is doing. A lot of people here view this as the ways of Washington, the ways of negotiations. I had a chance to speak to somebody who knows him pretty well, the former mayor of Charleston. He's part of that circle of politicians here in West Virginia. Take a listen.
I think he's being the same person he's always been. He's always been a mainstream conservative Democrat. That's what he was when he was in the House. That's what he was in the Senate. And he was basically that way as governor. He was tight with the money. I think he's he has a very practical approach to these things. I also think he comes out of a school of politics. That I do, where Republicans and Democrats talk to each other.
One of the things we're dealing with here is that mainstream conservative Democrat means one thing in West Virginia and something completely different in the rest of the country. Keep in mind, the man is the head of the Democratic Party here in West Virginia, but this is a state that has swung way to the right. This is a state that Donald Trump won by almost 70%.
Cal, I hope while you were there you tried that barbecue. We saw that warning sign right in the middle. It was funny. Warning, about to eat the world's best barbecue. Yeah. All right, Cal, now Democrats hope to reach an agreement by the end of this week. What would the money do in this state? Where would it go? What needs it most urgently in West Virginia?
So, look, I think there's a couple of things that West Virginia needs badly. The first is infrastructure. This is one of the states that ranks lowest when it comes to infrastructure. We're talking about bridges. We're talking about roads. And then in addition to that, you have a climate change concern. This is a state that's being ravaged by climate change. It's not just the floods from the rivers that you sort of see around me. It is also a lot of uncapped mines. There's money in it for that. One of the problems, though, is that when you talk to people here, they're not really sure what's in the bill. Take a listen.
Well, we don't understand the bill. Who understands the bill? You don't even know what's. Well, you don't even know what's in it yet. It hasn't been written. The one they've got's not what's going to pass. I know how this works. It is like watching sausage. Eventually, they'll have a bill, and then we'll see what's in it. But we here in West Virginia have to trust our representatives. I trust Joe Manchin.
I feel like the county commissioner president sounds like a lot of Capitol Hill producers and correspondents right now. And you hear that a lot here on the ground, too, right? People say, I don't know what's in the bill. I'm not going to judge Senator Manchin until I see a final product. The hope is that there will be some kind of deal soon, guys.
All right, Cal, you went right to the source. We've all been wondering. Thank you so much. Now let's get a check on your morning news. Now weather.
Bill, Karen's, good morning. We made it to Friday. We had a quiz. We had mention of cinnamon rolls.
It's Friday. I hope we don't have another quiz.
No, today is all about an active forecast. I mean, it's been relatively quiet this last week, and now all of a sudden things are starting to crank up. The big storm on the West Coast, we've got severe weather in the middle of the nation, so let's get all into it. So today, the storm that was yesterday in the West is moving on shore a little bit. Not a huge ordeal.
That's
There's just a little bit of rain to deal with for
right?
our friends in the West Coast, especially Northern California. Yes, and the next thing we're going to deal with is Saturday night, Sunday. This will be the big storm, one of the bigger storms they've ever had in October in northern and central California, San Francisco to the Bay, and the mountainous areas, 5 to 7 inches of rain, 1 to 2 feet of snow. That's more of a storm they get like late November, maybe December. So this is kind of an unusual event. And because of that and all the burn scars we have from all the fires lately, there are a lot of flash flood watches that cover a good chunk of central and northern portions of California. So we'll probably have pictures to show you on Monday of whatever transpires on Sunday. So today's forecast, enjoy a little bit of warmth left on the East Coast, but not as warm. Cooler today, definitely Chicago through the Great Lakes. And then heading into the weekend, fall feeling on Saturday, but still dry in the Northeast. Not bad in the middle of the country, but then watch out on Sunday. Severe weather possible, Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. And there's that powerful storm on the West Coast Sunday. And still yet to come, guys, I have a look at winter. Your winter outlook next hour.
Oh, boy.
Looking forward to it, Bill. And yeah, California can't catch a break. The West Coast there, it's either so dry, everything's burning, or now we're looking at, you said 5 to 7 inches of water. Wow. Okay.
All right. Bill. We will see those pictures Monday and get winter news next hour. See you in a bit.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.